committed to ensuring that WHO supports each one of you. You would recollect, Excellencies, that I have sent out 3 letters to you already. One went very early on the 11th of January 2020, just a few days or 10-11 days after WHO came to know about COVID-19. The second letter went to you on the 3rd of February, followed by a third letter on the 20th of March. In each of these, I tried to alert you to the situation, the challenges that the world was facing, and how best WHO could support you at this time of crisis. The pandemic, as we see, continues to accelerate. Globally, today, there are more than 800,000 confirmed cases. The global death toll has crossed 40,000 as of yesterday. For more than 2.5 months in our region, your efforts held the virus at bay. It was only by the 19th of March that the region registered a cumulative 1,000 cases. And by the 24th of March, that number had almost doubled to just below 2,000. 5 days later, it was more than 3,000. By 30th March, it was more than 4,000. So you've seen the quick progression of this disease. I appreciate very much the difficult decisions that you've had to make in your respective countries, including to implement unprecedented physical distancing measures. For several countries, we should start seeing the result of this by mid to late next week. Across the region, we see great variance in the case fatality rate, from as high as 9% in some countries to as low as 0.6%. Access to adequate health care is the key variable. As physical distancing measures take effect and health system capacity is increased, WHO will continue to support all countries, whatever the transmission scenario, to take the fight against this virus. With the right approach, the virus can be contained. In areas where community transmission occurs, it can be suppressed and controlled. Every case, cluster, and evidence of community transmission must be aggressively responded to. Basic public health measures such as active case detection, isolation, testing, treatment, and contact tracing are among our most powerful tools. To date, WHO has focused on several key areas of support, and let me enumerate these. First, disseminating accurate and timely information to member states. 2, strengthening member state readiness to respond through the development of national response plans. 3rd, providing member states supplies and equipment, including PPE and laboratory diagnostics. 4th, training member states' health workers on how to detect, prevent, respond to, and control the outbreak. 5th, leading a system-wise UN crisis management team to help member states tackle the outbreak. 6th, working with UN agencies and partners to prepare strategic preparedness and response plans to support the member states. And 7th, coordinating global work on surveillance, contact tracing, epidemiology, modeling, diagnostics, clinical care, and other ways to help member states identify, manage, and limit onward transmission. We have made important progress in several areas. As I wrote earlier this week to you, the regional office has released resources and has set up interdisciplinary groups that will help you to implement your response plans. The needs of several countries are highly specific, and I thank you very much for your rapid action in identifying and communicating them. For countries whose plan is not yet costed, I look forward to receiving from you the costed plan so that we can support your funding needs. We have so far allocated to this region 25.3 million US dollars. Partners are also looking to support you. To help them to do that, the UN has created an online partners platform that matches country needs with available resources. The platform will enable you to monitor all financial support to the response, whether implemented through the ministry, the UN, or any other partner. I request you to please identify a focal point in your ministry to manage this platform. My office will provide you whatever additional information you need in this regard. Before we go to each country and discuss each country's situation and needs, I want to first address an issue that is pertinent to every country of the Southeast Asia region, and that is the lack of essential commodities such as personal protective equipment for health workers and laboratory testing kits. This is, of course, a global problem and one that will have a significant impact on your response. If we cannot protect health workers and are unable to adequately test, we will be fighting with one arm tied. WHO has so far shipped around 2 million individual PPE items to 74 countries globally. We have provided almost all countries in the region PPE and laboratory equipment and will continue to do our best to bring you the supplies that you need. At last week's G20 meeting, the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros, called on the group to ramp up funding and production of PPEs for health workers, which was responded to positively. WHO will continue to work with the pandemic supply chain to ensure all at risk and critically affected countries are supported. I appreciate your needs and will do my very best to support you. You may be aware that WHO has now produced a set of guidelines to help countries balance the demands of responding directly to COVID-19 while maintaining essential health services. The guidelines include a set of targeted immediate actions to reorganize and maintain access to high-quality essential health services, including routine immunization, care during pregnancy and birth, treatment for infectious and non-communicable diseases and mental health conditions, blood services, and much more. Our WRs and country staff will support you to implement the guidelines across different program areas. All countries have made incredible progress in recent years, which we must vigorously protect and defend. I'm aware that several of our countries have issued their own set of guidelines and request you to share them with us so that we are able to set up a regional repository of guidelines and practices for experience sharing and learning from each other's best practice. That is the best way really to proceed, to see what has worked where and learn from it. Before I give the floor, I take this opportunity to commend countries in the region for participating in the WHO Solidarity Trial. To date, India, Indonesia, and Thailand have signed up to the multi-country trial, which will compare the safety and effectiveness of 4 different drugs or drug combinations against COVID-19. It is a historic undertaking that will dramatically reduce the time needed to generate robust evidence about what drugs are effective in treating COVID-19. The more countries that join, the faster we will have the results. I urge all countries to kindly sign up. With that, I thank you very much and look forward to hearing from you how WHO can best support you in this time of need. Thank you very much, Excellencies, for your attention. Can we now begin and go alphabetically, maybe? We have Mike Ryan, who has joined us from Geneva. Mike Ryan is the ADG of the Emergencies Program. Every day we have a meeting with him, and now it's become thrice a week. In the afternoon, our India time is 4:30, and therefore it would be very relevant to hear from Mike what the challenges are. And I know several of your questions will come later, but this was the only time that Mike would join us, and I felt it is very important for you to hear from him. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you, Poonam. Can you hear me in Asia?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And thank you, RD, for your leadership over the last 3 months. It's been a difficult and challenging time for everybody, for communities, for families, for countries, and for the World Health Organization and our other partners. I won't go into the details. I think your presentation covered actually everything in a very succinct and very direct way. Maybe I can just lay out from a global perspective what we're seeing in terms of the RD clearly indicated that from the Southeast Asia region point of view, you probably have the lowest incidence at the moment, almost on a global basis, if you look at the different WHO regions. And that is both a blessing, but it's also a challenge, because there are very, very large population in the Southeast Asia region, many challenges, and an opportunity to maybe not have to experience the worst that other countries have experienced. So in that sense, you're at the bottom of the mountain with potentially big mountain to climb. And we want to make sure that we can make that ascent and make the descent together in a way that protects our communities. You will have seen in other countries in the Western Pacific region, like Singapore, Japan, Korea, and China, have implemented comprehensive strategies that focus very much on community activation, education, on a strong public health capacity, a massive acceleration in surveillance, in case detection, in community surveillance, in testing, in isolation of cases, in quarantine of contacts. And they've matched that with a ramp up in health systems capacity to deal with cases, all the while putting the communities and information at the center. And while they've experienced different epidemics and they've implemented slightly different measures, it's not been exactly the same. They've managed to keep a lid on the disease, and they're managing to keep their health systems functioning, because the health systems are not under massive pressure as they are in other parts of the world. In Europe and in North America, we see a different pattern. We see a near exponential growth in cases, with large numbers of very sick people arriving in hospital and putting the system under extreme pressure. And many of these countries are not in the position now to implement the kind of detailed public health measures like contact tracing and ramping up testing in people in the community who are showing symptoms. I think we have to go back and remember, even though we're dealing with the pandemic and even though we're dealing with epidemics in 194 countries, we have to remember that each country is dealing with its own epidemic, and each province or state or community is dealing with its own outbreak. And we cannot forget how to do outbreak response. And at the moment, we are in a situation where shutdowns, slowdowns and lockdowns have become the primary instrument of disease suppression. And in some situations that's appropriate because we want to reduce the pressure of infection within our communities. But we all know that that is in itself doing economic and social damage. What is the way out? What is the transition from lockdowns? How do we ensure that we don't have shutdowns of other health services, that our education systems don't fall apart, that our most vulnerable people can eat and feed their families and work? If we want to have an exit strategy or a transition strategy, we need to reach a steady state with the virus. It is very unlikely in the coming months that we can get to 0 cases everywhere in the world. We're a long way out from a vaccine. So we have a phase in which we may have to enter a steady state and accept that we're going to have low levels, hopefully low levels, of endemic virus presence, with epidemics occurring in places where control measures are released or where control measures are not implemented in the most coherent way possible. From that perspective, it is very important, and the Director General and the RDs have been communicating this again and again. It is the comprehensive, all of society, all of government strategies that have worked elsewhere. It is leadership at the top, it is communities at the centre, and it is individual responsibility that drives that community's success. Education, communication, transparency, levelling with people, and then supporting the response through a massive scale-up in both the public health intervention, surveillance, contact tracing, testing, isolation and quarantine, matched with an equal and probably greater investment in the health system to be able to cope with cases in terms of isolation and humane treatment. This is very, very difficult to achieve. This is not easy. If it was easy, we wouldn't be having this call. But I think Southeast Asia is in a strong position in that you have dealt with major epidemics in the past. Southeast Asia did superbly in the fight against polio. Southeast Asia led the world in the eradication of smallpox. So there are massive capacities, there is a huge energy, and there's a huge innovation, and there's a huge solidarity that needs to be unleashed in your populations. And there is a massive challenge to accept the responsibility and accountability that comes with serving our communities. Dr. Puram Singh laid out all of the issues. The specific issue I will address very briefly is the issue of supplies, because this is something that is of great concern to everybody right now. Everybody is struggling to access the PPE, the masks, the ventilators, the lab diagnostics and other medical equipment that's needed to fight this disease. I would also point you to the fact that with the discussion on ventilators, and it's very important that we're able to provide ventilation to those who are most critical. But in many, many situations, that's not possible. Ventilators are expensive, they're complicated, they're difficult to manage, they require very high levels of technical competence to run them. There are not alternatives, but there are other solutions we also need to be focused on. Medical oxygen. Oxygen is probably saving way more lives globally right now than ventilators. And ensuring that people who are moderately sick with pneumonia, who are entering into a phase of desaturation, that they can be supported with medical oxygen. That will save lives. And everybody should be able to access oxygen therapy if they need to. Additionally, there are alternatives to ventilation like CPAP, which is a non-invasive way of doing continuous positive airway pressure. That means you don't have to ventilate the patient, you don't have to sedate the patient, you don't need to have skilled anaesthetists doing that. And there are many solutions around CPAP and other interventions. So I would advise ministers of health not just to look at ventilators as the solution for therapy. We need to be looking at oxygen, we need to be looking at continuous positive airway pressure, we need to be looking at triaging our patients so that those who are likely to deteriorate get to the most critical care first, and that we're able to manage milder patients, potentially in other settings, in separate hospitals, on separate floors of hospitals, and that we're actually focused on the most critically sick in the areas where we have the best chance of saving them. Notwithstanding that, health workers are in the front line, and we've seen all over the world, this is not just an issue in Asia. We've seen the horror, 63 medical doctors and nurses have died in Italy already. Thousands have been infected. Over 10,000 health workers have been infected in Spain. Thousands of health workers have been infected in New York, in the United States, in the UK. As the RD has said, Southeast Asia has done a remarkable job in building health systems over the last decades. We risk not only having our communities brought down by COVID-19, but we risk losing one of our most precious assets, and that is the frontline health workforce that all of us have spent years and decades building, training, capacitating. They deserve our best support and our greatest protection. We have been, as the RD said, providing material to all countries, but it's a drop in the ocean of need. And over the last number of days, we've been working very, very closely to try and change the game in terms of global supply. We've partnered through the UN Coordination Cell with WFP, with UNICEF, with Gavi, with the Global Fund, with UNITAID, the Gates Foundation and others, to create an essential supplies catalogue that will be based on the national action plans that the RD has laid out for you. And we intend to do joint demand management. In other words, the international agencies will do joint demand and supply forecasting. We will consolidate country requests, and we will release together the needs based on the needs at country level and the epidemiologic situation. Purchasing will be done through a virtual stockpiling mechanism with centralized sourcing of supplies from manufacturers, which will include price and volume negotiation, quality assuring and testing, and longer terms agreements for ensuring supply. Working with WFP and DHL and other providers, we will be putting in place a global warehousing and distribution system that will allow us to get materials to countries much more quickly. Again, this solution is happening in the context of a global market fed. It will not be a perfect solution, but what it will do is, based on your national action plans, based on the needs identified at national level, we, working with other international partners, will be able to work together in the most coherent way possible to supply those needs. This is taking a huge ramp up in our organisation. The Secretary General, the Director General and others are deeply engaged in this process, and we trust that this will provide a clearer, more transparent, more predictable way for many of you to access some of the most essential supplies. That does not in any way stop or interfere with your own access to national or global markets, and increasing your own production and increasing your own access. But what we will try to do is ensure that you have a straightforward, easy to understand and transparent means of requesting material from this joint mechanism at global level. This will cover PPE, it will cover lab reagents, it will cover ventilators and other equipment. On the lab side, and many of you will have received kits from WHO, we're also working on other platforms. Many of you have implemented the Cepheid Gene Expert platform very often for TB monitoring. Cepheid has now got approval for a diagnostic cartridge for COVID-19. We're currently negotiating with Cepheid, with Global Fund, ourselves and the Clinton Health Associates are negotiating for bulk buying of those Gene Expert cartridges. You we'll need to examine at national level to what extent you use the Gene Expert platform in other areas like TB, and to what extent you can divert some of that capacity to COVID diagnostics. That has to be a national decision. Tuberculosis, for example, and HIV are very important diseases. Equally, many of you have high throughput diagnostic platforms, mainly for monitoring HIV and for doing regular viral load counts in many of the patients around the world with HIV. These systems are produced by companies like Roche, Abbott, Thermo Fisher, and others. Again, reagents for those high throughput systems have been approved in the last 2 weeks for COVID-19. We will be both purchasing those reagents and, again, through this mechanism, providing them to countries. Again, it must be a national policy decision, number one, to identify how many of those high throughput systems are in your country and to what extent you want to utilize part of the capacity of those platforms for speeding up high throughput diagnostics. We will be in touch through our regional emergency director and through the RD to further explain the mechanism in the coming days. But we hope that this approach will provide a cleaner, a more accessible, more transparent and easier way for you to access supplies above and beyond those supplies you can access yourself on national and global markets. I will leave it at that. There's many more things to say, but I thought, Poonam, that everyone was probably more interested in hearing about supplies than anything else from me today. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I think what you mentioned is something which will come up by the honourable ministers here, and therefore thanks, Mike, for addressing it straight away. And not only that, you've come up with various alternative solutions, and I think that is what is very relevant. We have been getting requests for ventilators, and you already mentioned that medical oxygen is a good way forward, and CPAP also, and that is what we should be thinking about, and member states should be thinking about. For diagnostics also, you have very carefully suggested to countries to use the already existing diagnostics for TB and HIV with new reagents for COVID-19, which Mike has already said that they are trying to procure, and the Global Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation would help in that. So I think what's very relevant, Mike, and what you said really about whole of government approach and whole of society approach is very, very important. And I'm sure our honourable ministers who are listening to this have been implementing it and will do it with renewed vigour now. So with that, I thank Mike. Mike has very admirably...
Sorry, RD, sorry, I forgot my manners. I forgot to introduce, this is a very important meeting, and we have Dr. Jawad Majoor, our ADG for preparedness, and we've got Dr. Ibrahima Sosef Fall, our ADG for emergency response. So the three of us are here, and I think that reflects the importance of this video conference and our solidarity and support to you, to the team in Sierra, and to our colleagues at national level.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. And thanks to Jawad and Soche for being there too. These are the three key people who are handling the WHO Health Emergencies Program, with Mike steering it admirably. Whatever requests you make, Excellencies, to us, whether it is guidelines that you want, or there is diagnostic support you need, or lab support you need, or PPEs, these are the people who come to our rescue, and we transmit this to them. So thanks to all of you for being really generous with us and our member states, and I'm sure ministers of health of our region would be grateful to you and join me in thanking you. We can now proceed, and if you'd care to listen, Mike, you're welcome. With Jawad and Soche, we will now turn to our ministers to tell us what are the challenges that they are facing in their respective countries, any important questions that they want to pose at this time. They could also give us an update of what is really happening in their countries. There are some ministers of health who are busy with their presidents and will join us. The Minister of Health of Sri Lanka has informed us that she's with her president and will join us in another 20 minutes. I've also had a message from the Health Minister of India that with the Prime Minister, they are addressing all the chief ministers of the states of India, and he will join us as soon as that finishes. We have a request from our Maldives minister that he would like to be invited for the floor early so that he can join his president in a meeting. And with that, I invite the Maldives health minister to take the floor.
Although still unfolding, this is the Maldives story on our preparedness and response to COVID-19. We did not wait for the case one to knock our doors to start our preparations. We started implementing prevention and control measures since early January 2020. Risk assessment during that time indicated Maldives to be a high-risk country. Based on this, we took several measures to limit import and community spread of COVID-19 in Maldives. Preparedness strategy was focused on identifying our weak areas and strengthening measures to combat the ports of entry. This includes implementing travel restrictions and screenings at the port of entry, limiting entry to mobility to inhabited islands, including the capital Male, where 1/3 of the population resides, was also a strategy. Identifying quarantine facilities for international travelers to limit mixing with community was also a priority. The operation was initially started as a health emergency operation, and we set up the health emergency operation center on mid-January. Technical advisory team was also formed to provide technical direction to the operation on late January. This operation was further widened to incorporate multiple stakeholders, and this resulted in operation being named National Emergency Operation Center in late February. We declared our very first national public health emergency under the Public Health Protection Act on 12th March 2020 to curb local transmission of COVID-19 in the country. This was following the first confirmed case on the 7th March 2020. As of 1st April 2020, 867 individuals are being monitored in quarantine facilities, while 15 individuals are being monitored in isolation. Some individuals, mostly low risk or medium risk contacts, have also been placed under home isolation. The main focus of this operation is early detection, quarantine, testing, and isolation. This is coupled with contact tracing and close monitoring of suspects and potential contacts. Strong risk communication mechanisms were also in place to inform the public. Frequent hand washing, social distancing, and limiting movement within the communities were communicated in different languages, age, persons with disabilities, and special needs. Currently, with 19 confirmed cases with 13 recoveries, we are preparing for the next phase of this epidemic. At this stage, the main challenges are sourcing of ICU and critical care equipment, medical consumables including PPE and medicines. Human resource for case management remains a huge challenge for us. This increases the need to train the existing human resource on critical care and IPC. On a final note, the government will persevere to enforce stringent measures to ensure the safety of everyone in the Maldives, thereby contributing to the global effort to control the spread and containment of COVID-19. Maldives being a geographically very isolated islands, we have a natural geographical advantage in isolating communities. However, being a very small country, very resource-limited country, we go through a huge challenge in the challenges. The human resource challenge and resource mobilization is a key challenge. At this time, I would like to appreciate the leadership of our regional director in timely involvement and her commitment and her role in coordinating our regional efforts. And also our leadership at WHO headquarters, we appreciate your guidance and your timely involvement. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We now move on, and can I invite Bhutan?
Sorry, Dr. Poonam, is it Bangladesh or Bhutan?
You can move to Bangladesh if you'd like more time. Can I invite Bangladesh then? No.
With comorbid conditions, elderly populations, and our socially disadvantaged population. So we are doing a line listing of all this population so that we are able to provide direct health services, economic support, and social support to this group of population in the country. So our preparedness on the red stage is also ready and finalized as of now. Now the fourth slide basically goes over our response strategy as of now. We started our first intervention around the 15th of January, where we started our intervention, where we instituted the screening at the point of entries, including the international airports and all the domestic international borders. Following with it, on the 29th of January, we called upon the national emergency. We activated the National Disaster Committee, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and activated that modality so that these can then be transcend down into the district level as well. Similarly, on the 14th of March, we made facility quarantined available, and then on of course, the major milestone is, as of now, on the 23rd, when we made facility quarantine mandatory, and on the 28th, of course, we extended our quarantine from the 14 to 21 days, given that there are growing number of evidence that suggests the incubation period to be longer than the 14 days. So we didn't want to take any chances, so we extended the quarantine to 21 days as of 28th of March. So as of now, that is the roadmap of our response in the country. And if you look at the key, next slide please, look at the key features of the Bhutan's response. Of course, under the leadership of His Majesty, the King, who is actually in the front line of this epidemic. As we discussed this, he is traveling the length and breadth of the country and working and supervising the preparedness plan. This is basically has been a whole of a government approach. A lot of effective systems are put into place. And also, of course, I think I must thank the country office. In collaboration with WHO country office, a simulation exercise was conducted in early November, and that was extremely helpful in really helping us plan for this pandemic as well. Equally, with our national preparedness and response plan, including a worst case scenario, we feel that we have a good plan in place. If we don't have to use it, well and good. If we have to, we have a plan that we can implement, which is not only Ministry of Health. I think it's a lot of other sectors who are also involved in this plan. My next slide, please. If we look at the key challenges at the moment, again, taking cue from His Majesty's quote on smallness. We are a small nation. We have limited health workforce. Currently, there is only one ICU physician and approximately 109 specialists and 116 GDMOs. So if we do go into the worst case scenario for us, health workforce, limited workforce, I'm happy that I had certain discussion with Madam Adi as well on this, and I think she shared some excellent suggestions we are implementing at the moment in terms of task sharing and really working on a medical search strategy. Of course, disruption of supplies of PPEs, test kits, equipment, including critical care equipment. Bhutan is a small economy, small country. We don't produce anything in the country, unfortunately, and we rely heavily on imports of these equipment from other countries. And similarly, on clinical management expertise, if we do have to manage critical case with comorbid condition, say as cancer, it will be very, very difficult for a small nation like us to really take care of these patients. And of course, our biggest and the worst fear is disruption of our regular health services, which might be detrimental impact on our primary healthcare indicators. I think this was something that I raised during the earlier video conference as well, in terms of disruptions of vaccines and essential drug supplies that might disrupt our regular health services. And this is, I think, where we as a nation region must come together to strategize so that these regular services do not get disruptions. And of course, my last slide on the way forward is we would also want to again highlight that we must facilitate so that there is a humanitarian corridor for supply of equipment, drugs, and human resources, so that we can minimize the impact of COVID-19 on humanity. And of course, strengthening the regional collaboration for preparedness and response, including some sort of a stockpiling of essential equipments and drugs, because I think this has been the biggest experience both globally and regionally, that we are running out of PPEs. If we do, we compromise the health and well-being of our health workers who are in the front line fighting this COVID pandemic. And of course, the last one, but very important way forward is also an exchange of knowledge and experience, so that we can help each other as a region and come out of it stronger and more united. So with this, these are my humble submissions, and I want to thank the Excellencies for making time available. And once again, we would like to thank the SERO office and the WHO country office for facilitating this, so that we are all on the same platform, fighting collectively and united. So with that, I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, and we take on board the excellent suggestions you made for the way forward. We had set up a group of ministers on WhatsApp on your request, thinking that that could be a platform where some knowledge, good practices could be exchanged, and I would urge the ministers to kindly use that platform for exchange of information. We do understand that Bhutan has key challenges as far as health workforce is concerned. We are very conscious of that, and we are trying our best to see how we can support it. Now with lockdowns, that has become a greater challenge. So whenever there are requests for any HR support, we do feel that comes in the way, but we are fully conscious of it, and whenever possible, we would be able to give that support. You have also mentioned about the regular health programs and health services not being disrupted, and even the Director General of WHO emphasized that some time ago, that this should not disrupt our normal programmatic services like TB, malaria, and whatever is relating to reproductive health. So we are fully conscious of that, and we try to see that this COVID-19 and the demands that it has made on the health system should not disrupt that in any way. Thank you very much for all these suggestions. And may I now go back and request the Minister of Health of Bangladesh. We are very sorry, just keeping in mind the time, we thought we would utilize it since we lost you on the screen and I was told that there was a power cut there. Over to you, Excellency, for completing your presentation. Honorable Minister of Health of Bangladesh.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Hear you, Excellency.
Can you hear me? Okay, so where I left is that now I will let you know about other ongoing activities as it is without hampering the normal treatment facility. We have arranged dedicated 10,000 beds for COVID patients in dedicated hospitals. In Dhaka, there are about 7 to 8 dedicated hospitals for COVID patients, and also dedicated hospitals in all districts of Bangladesh. Already we have arranged 6,000 beds and also ICU facility in those hospitals. It may not be enough, but ICU facility, as you know, that we don't have enough. We have got about 600 to 700 ICUs at the moment in the government sector. So that we are requiring more for that is still in the range, and adequate protection measure has been given to them, like PPE, mask and PPE, and all these things have been provided to them, and treatment guide has been also private site and action guide to all. Regarding also, we have been making awareness program to people to maintain social distance, to wash their hand, and also not to make any social program or gathering. And as you know that now we are in a sort of lockdown condition where the people are told to remain in their homes, and school, colleges has been closed. So these are the actions we have taken, and also our Prime Minister has recently addressed the nation over a video conference and gave the necessary. So the present situations that we find is that it has become a little bit difficult to keep people quarantined. So that is one of our experience. And also we are facing little difficulty in contact tracing. We are trying our best, but it is becoming difficult. And so we have arranged a lot of testing facility all over the country, but the people are not going for testing that way. We are encouraging, we have been telling them, and over television and all, maybe there is some stigma related to this. And the private hospitals and doctors, they are little, I think, hesitant in treating the COVID patients. So that is we will be expecting is the testing kits that we might require, and the ventilators or similar things which may help the patient. But overall situation in Bangladesh is under control, and we have been able to keep the spread of COVID to a great extent, and we hope that we can continue that, and this lockdown condition, or we are calling it holidays, up to 11th has been declared, 11th of this month, and hopefully we should be able to, we have shared our experience, and we will also like to share the experience and guidelines from WHO, from RD, and from our member countries. So thank you for listening to me, and also we will expect your guidance.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We appreciate the hard work that you've been putting in for a densely populated country like Bangladesh. To contain the virus is a real challenge, and you have 54 cases till now, which is really commendable. We take note of the challenges that you just mentioned, and we do understand that quarantine would be a challenge, testing is a challenge. Some people don't come forward, as you rightly pointed out, and there is a shortage of test kits, also ventilators. We've taken on board your requests earlier also, and we will try to see how best we can respond to them. You mentioned gene expert machines, about 300. And we are now, the cartridges for the machines will go in production. And you heard the executive director of the emergencies program say that they are already in consultation with the Global Fund and the Gates Foundation to see how those can be funded and given to several countries around the world. And we have already made a request in that regard. So thanks for your suggestions. And may I now turn to the Minister of Health of Thailand, who has a conflicting schedule and would have to leave early. Over to you, Excellency.
Good afternoon, Madam Regional Director, Excellencies, distinguished participants. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Madam Regional Director for organizing this video conference, which allows the member states to share and update each other on the situation of COVID-19 and how we can work together to fight this pandemic. I would also like to thank the government of Japan for the financial support managed by the WHO Thailand Country Office to battle COVID-19 in Thailand. We thank all the domestic and international donors who have provided us additional supplies during this time of need. Now, let me share with you briefly on the Thai situation and measures that we have implemented. As of today, 104 new confirmed cases have been reported. In total, we are having 1,875 confirmed cases. With 16 deaths, the mortality rate is 0.85%. Out of the confirmed cases, almost 1,600 are Thai citizens, and the rest are non-Thai. Most of confirmed cases were reported in Bangkok and Nonthaburi. The youngest confirmed case is a 5-month-old child. The oldest confirmed case is 84-year-old. The average age of all patients in Thailand is 40. The estimation of daily new confirmed cases with 3 scenarios. If we do not implement any preventive measures, the number of confirmed cases will be escalated significantly. So we have been implementing the social distancing together with other measures to bring the curve down. Thailand has implemented both public health and social measures to curb the outbreak. The public health measures include early detection and early response. We have been in active surveillance since the outbreak in Wuhan in late December. Case management is the key to success. Some private hotels offer their facilities for self-quarantine of mild cases. Severe cases are admitted in hospitals. We ensure adequate resources not only for COVID-19, but also for maintaining other health services. The N95, mask, PPE suits, and ICU facilities and respirators are very essential for COVID-19 treatment in our country. For the social measures, we give most importance to social distancing, encouraging people to stay home to stop virus. We close the boxing stadium and entertaining places to limit mass gathering the government also provides financial assistance to the most affected. Fighting against this pandemic poses several challenges to our society, especially on economic impact. How we can overcome these challenges are equally important. Thailand proposes the following points for consideration. Perform strict exit screening of all high-risk passengers, for example, close contact and passengers with symptoms. Any travel restriction in member states must exempt the production and transport of essential medicines, vaccines, and medical devices both within the country and abroad. Strongly advocate for collective research and development for diagnostics, medicines, vaccines, PPE, and health systems response. Continue experience sharing among member states, effective measures to deal with COVID-19 and health systems after COVID-19. Before I end my talk, I would like to quote the speech of the Director General of WHO that we all must fight to stop the virus, unite to confront the pandemic together, and ignite to increase productions of essential medical supplies that save lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Even though Thailand was the first country which was hit by this virus in our region, yet we find that the number of deaths are only 16, and that's perhaps because of the public health measures that Thailand very promptly adopted. We are aware and we commend the social distancing measures and other social measures. You raised some very valid points, Excellency, about the economic impact of this, and we as an organization are also trying to see how best we could look at that. The other suggestions that you made about travel restrictions to exempt transport of essential medicines is already being followed in some countries of our region, where cargo is exempted from this travel restriction. And the other suggestions you made, we'll take on board, and we will see how best we could react to those and help you with those. Thank you, Excellency. Can we now move on to India? Is not here, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we now move on to India? Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister of India.
Thank you, Dr. Poonam Khetpal Singh ji, all the other WHO CRO officials on the other side, and all our distinguished colleague ministers. I understand that we have Honorable Minister from Bangladesh there, Honorable Minister from Bhutan, Indonesia, Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Timor-Leste. They are all here with us, and I must at the outset congratulate World Health Organization and particularly the Southeast Asia Regional Office and its Regional Director, Dr. Poonam Khetpal Singh ji, for organizing this video conference. The other day we had an opportunity of listening to experiences of countries from other regions of the world, chaired by the Director General of WHO, and this is a great initiative on the part of WHO, and now we have the good opportunity of sharing the experience of from the ministers of our own region. I am sorry I joined late because for the last 3 hours or so, our Prime Minister, our Home Minister, our Defence Minister and myself, along with senior officials, we were having a video conferencing with all the chief ministers of the country and discussing in detail the prevailing situation and what more needs to be done in the country. So, once again, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I would briefly describe what we have been able to do in India. I can only, can I have the first slide, please? This is the slide which simply depicts that as soon as we got to know on 7th of January that China has informed the World Health Organization about the cases of pneumonia which they earlier thought as cases of unknown etiology, but they could actually establish that there was a coronavirus, new strain of coronavirus which had affected the people in Wuhan city. The very next day on 8th of January itself in India, we organized our technical expert group meeting with all the top experts, and our Director General of Health Services chaired that meeting, and we started thinking about what could actually happen to the rest of the world or maybe India. In the next couple of days, we had formulated our detailed response plan for the whole country. And as this slide will depict, that on 17th January itself, we had issued very detailed instructions to all the states in the country about how do we handle, if at all there is an impending issue related to this virus's entry into the country. On the same day itself, that was 17th of January, we issued detailed travel advisories, and on 7 major international airports in the country, we started the point of entry screening, that's a thermal screening to actually locate if at all there were passengers who had some early symptoms of the disease who were entering India. Next, as we all know that on 30th of January, and then this was declared as an emergency of international concern by WHO also, and then recently they declared it on 11th of March as a pandemic. This is a slide which in fact shows that shows the cumulative and daily new cases as on today, and we can right now, as you can see, we have 1,834 cases in the country right now, and we can appreciate that there is a linear and non-exponential growth of positive cases in India. Things for the moment are under control, and the situation is responsive to our efforts. The next slide is about the number of deaths in the country. It is again showing a linear growth, and the majority of the cases that I wish to highlight the majority of the cases here, the death cases, they are all above 60, and they had comorbidities, like somebody had extensive diabetes, somebody had kidney failure, somebody had massive heart diseases. That's the general. And I have to inform my colleagues that most of the patients who are admitted right now, the positive cases, because every day I talk to all the health ministers of the various states in India, literally majority of the cases are stable. We ask them very specific questions. Are they on ventilators? Are they in ICUs? Or are they on oxygen? But I feel happy to inform you that very few number, I would say insignificant numbers, we can call them as maybe serious or critical, but a large majority of them are stable. Then this is the next slide. this is this slide in fact shows that the Honorable Prime Minister of India has been monitoring our situation since the beginning of the whole you can say problem in India. Every cabinet meeting we had been discussing this. He had been having official review meetings, and in the early days of February, he constituted a group of ministers under my leadership with the Minister of Aviation, Shipping, Home Affairs, External Affairs, etc. And since then we have had 10 meetings of the group of ministers. Our cabinet secretary has been taking regularly meetings over the last almost 3 months. We are completing next week with all the different ministries. They have been mentioned there: civil aviation, shipping, home affairs, external affairs, pharma, textile, tourism, industries, commerce and defense. We have been having regular video conferences with the health secretaries of all the states and all the relevant central ministries. Our technical joint monitoring group of experts, which met for the first time on 8th of January, has had 10 meetings since now. In the very beginning itself, I wrote to the Honorable Chief Ministers of the country and have been having regular video conferences with all the state health ministers. Almost every second, third day, I talk to every minister on the telephone. I have briefed the Parliament on 3-4 occasions about the situation in the country, and have been regularly visiting airports, quarantine facilities, hospitals, and seeing for myself along with my colleagues the implementation levels in the field. And in the initial stages itself, for monitoring the whole country, we allocated responsibilities to joint secretary level officers in the ministry to visit the various airports in the country and to visit the various hospital, to look for the various hospital preparedness and what's happening in the various ministries. So everything was being monitored in the early stages with the help of joint secretary level officers all over the country. Next slide, please. This is a slide which in fact depicts that we started, as I said earlier, we initiated all our responses for the health sector preparedness on 17th January itself. We started the point of entry surveillance and proactive and preemptive interministerial coordination as our focus areas. And this slide in fact shows that whether it was screening at the airports, whether it was screening at the seaports, or whether it was screening at the borders, especially with our neighboring country Nepal, we started it very early. And then we have a very robust disease integrated disease surveillance system in the country, and we started this community surveillance itself very early, around the same time on 17th of January. Then preparing for the personal protection kits, N95 masks, reagents also, that we started doing very early. In the initial stages we started with 15 labs, and right now I think we have 124 government labs in the whole country and about 51 private labs with 16,000 collection centers all over the country. This slide of course tells us that it was on all the fronts that we started building our core capacities, whether it was logistics, laboratory testings. From the very beginning we imagined a situation where we could have great difficulties, so making the whole country prepared for isolation beds, critical care management, infection prevention. And then in the later slides we will tell you in detail that what did we do for ensuring that we communicate to the people of India what are the risks and what are the you can say health education measures, and what is that they need to change in their lifestyle. And then of course there is another slide which will later on depict how massively we did the capacity building, training of all types of people. Next slide. Can you change? Yes. This is the slide which depicts how robust our training mechanism has been, starting from airport health officials and immigration officials. We trained our state and district surveillance officers through video conferences, medical. We evacuated over 2,500 people from 5-6 countries like from China, Japan, Iran and Italy. Many of them were Indians who were stranded there, but even about 48 foreigners also we had evacuated. So we trained those medical evacuation teams for Wuhan, Yokohama, Iran, Italy, and of course the airline crew and the other handling staff. Quarantine medical teams were trained for patient management and infection prevention and control. State rapid response teams were trained for managing high risk pathogens. Then our NDMA, that's the Disaster Management Authority of the country, it convened meetings of the civil society organizations and 20 organizations, big organizations and 300 NGOs. Then on 6th of March, we organized a national level training of trainers for specifically dedicated to all aspects of COVID-19 management. And here it was attended by 260 health professionals from states, ESI, railways, defense and other ministry. But the big thing was that at 1,000 locations in the country, people were logged in for this training, and thousands of related people, they got trained in a single day. And the focus areas were epidemiology, surveillance, laboratory support, clinical management, non-pharmaceutical interventions, infection prevention control and risk communication. Then followed by this national level training, on 9th and 11th of March we did state level trainings across the country, followed again by district level and hospital level trainings on 20th of March. And similarly there was an orientation workshop on 18th of March. And then on 21st March we have trained people in a big way on the usage of ventilators. Next. Can I have the next slide? Yes. This is about the surveillance that I talked about. We started this on 17th of January itself. As I said, the NDMA has organized these 147 training programs of CISF, customs, immigration, ground handling staff, and we had dedicated central teams which were trained, and they inspected all airports of the country. We started with 7 big airports in the country, but later on we extended everything to all the 30 international airports and for all the flights coming from anywhere in the world. And we screened about 14,154 flight passengers, and 15,25,000 passengers were screened during this period. Similarly, on our 12 major ports, seaports, and 65 non-major seaports, we screened 1,062 vessels, and 43,443 passengers / crew members were screened. When we got this information that Nepal got its first case, so the very same day we took a decision of screening everybody at the borders with Nepal. You see, we have 4 states in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Bihar, Bengal, and then Sikkim, where we have borders with Nepal. And at these borders we continued this screening for a long time till even now, and we already screened 20,70,000 people there. And adjoining to these borders, we organized in villages 5,000 gram sabhas, because you see these borders are a bit porous, so we didn't take even a bit of chance, and we organized these gram sabhas in all our adjoining villages. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, that from the 17th January, in fact, when we gave our detailed plan to the states about how do we actually start preparing ourselves, how do we start acting ourselves, on 18th January itself, the very next day, the community surveillance, we have a very robust integrated disease surveillance program in the country. We started that on 18th of January, and there was this monitoring through the state and district surveillance officers with the support of the rapid response teams. Advisories were issued to all the states and the union territories on 17th January for surveillance of every case which had a severe acute respiratory illness. And we developed an online portal for states to ensure name-based monitoring and surveillance. And today, when I talk to you, we are at the moment having 5,56,684 travelers who have been brought into community surveillance, and we are keeping a close watch on everything that they do, whether they are in homes, whether they are in quarantine. Almost for the older people, every day they are being contacted either through telephone or personal contact every second, third day. So it's a close watch on everybody's movement. We found 23,875 people symptomatic, and we referred 4,065 people to the hospitals. And this is on the right side, you can see this is our photograph of our portal, where every person who was put on surveillance, the states were recording the detailed identity of that person. Next. This is the slide which just depicts that we evacuated in spite of all these hardships and all these troubled times, and when many of these passengers were supposed to be positive, say from places like Iran or Italy, or initially from China and then from the ship in Japan, we brought 2,594 people to India, which had a significant number, 48 were foreigners. We kept them under quarantine here, and after 14 days when they tested negative, we discharged them after taking all sorts of precautions. Then next. This is this in fact tells you about the India's testing strategy. Our testing strategy has been guided by some of our best scientists, public health experts, and our doctors, clinicians, epidemiologists. And right now, you see, this is about, we had a very well defined criteria about who needs to be tested, and right now, apart from those who came from outside, their contacts, symptomatic contacts, and then we are also testing every case of acute respiratory illness in the country who gets admitted to the hospital. On the right side, you can see that we have right now developed 126 laboratories in the country, with 51 are private labs apart from these government labs. Our per day capacity of testing right now is 15,000. We can expand it further, and right now the last yesterday till 8 p.m. in a single day we had tested 5,654 people, and till now we have tested 53,605 people. This is the data of yesterday evening. Then next slide. This is how we from the very first day communicated to the people. You know, ours is a huge country with the 1.35 billion people. So every day through daily press briefings at a fixed time, media releases, more than 7 million emails, risk communication material. You can see a sample of that on the slide. They were all distributed in various languages to people even in the villages, experts talking about the whole subject continuously on panels, news discussions, TV spots, radio spots. We had shooted out almost 235 crore text messages to Indians, and then the one important thing that we did was that every telephone call in the country, whether it is for a person who lives in a village or a remote area or a tribal area, every telephone call for many days, and even now it begins with a caller tune message which starts with whatever is needed to be told to them about hand hygiene, about respiratory etiquettes, not touching the face, etc., social distancing. All these were communicated to everyone in this country regularly through caller tunes and messages in the phone, videos of meetings of ministers, etc. All those things have been disseminated regularly through social media. We have used Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social medias regularly. A 24/7 national control room and a toll-free number, and this control room till last week had received over 2 lakh calls and over 50,000 mails which are replied regularly. At the bottom of the whole slide you can see that there were 241 positive articles which were written in the media, 92 press releases, 48 videos on YouTube, Facebook posts, tweets, press briefings. So we did practically everything possible to teach the country about what is that they need to do. Next slide. Then here itself in the risk communication, you know that on 22nd we had the Prime Minister appealed to the whole country to observe a Janta curfew, and that was a day when voluntarily everybody stayed inside. In fact, it was a voluntary curfew where everybody participated. It was very successful. At 5 o'clock people came out of their houses, and then in a symbolic manner they conveyed their gratefulness to the medical community, doctors, nurses, and that was a unique, I think, event on 22nd of March which was organized. And then we all know that on 25th of March the Prime Minister declared a complete lockdown in the country. Then this next slide is about the hospital preparedness. We started about that from the very early stages. All the state and central government hospitals were advised for assessment of the various isolation beds, critical care facilities that could be created, etc. And then detailed guidelines have been issued by the Health Ministry on a regular basis. We have put everything that needs to be told to the people and the governments and the officials on our Health and Family Welfare Ministry's website, and on a daily basis we get something like 22 to 30 crore hits on our website these days. So that is it is thoroughly comprehensive. Anything that anyone wishes to know about what's India doing, what are the guidelines for any class of people in the society, that's there on our website. So this issues, we had guidelines issued on surveillance, contact tracing, sample collection, packaging, transportation, infection prevention control, clinical management protocols, cluster containment plans, etc. We conducted regularly meetings with private hospitals to prepare them. Central hospitals were also advised for earmarking of isolation beds. Even now, right now, even railways has started preparing themselves to use the railway bogies, as you can say, for isolation beds in case of need. As on today, we have dedicatedly, pinpointedly fixed 1,52,865 beds exclusively for COVID patients, 33,136 ICU beds dedicated for that, and then We are right now promoting all over the country, in every city, every district, every state, to dedicate hospitals and hospital blocks exclusively for COVID patients, so that, like in some countries, we had the same to all the types of patients in one hospital, and learning from their experience where they suffered a little more. So we have now these dedicated hospitals are being notified by the states. And right now we have exclusively dedicated 16,446 ventilators, which are kept dedicated for these isolation beds, and 40,000 ventilators more. In fact, it is right now the number is 47,000 ventilators are in the pipeline, which we shall add to our list of these exclusive ventilators for this in the near future. Next. This slide again tells us that we have been, it's not about the health, but other issues also are being taken care of in the best possible manner, regulating non-essential services, minimizing social contact, and we shall be able to offer healthcare services to the most needy. How do we do that in lockdown? Ensuring availability of healthcare workers. We have ensured that even the retired people, the other people, all the people in the medical community, they are all being mobilized and institutionalized for any future events where we may need them. The availability of enough PPEs, medicines, isolation beds, ventilators, implementation of social distancing strategies. So this is this slide tells us that we have been proactively doing whatever is needed, and all our efforts have been like preemptive efforts, preemptive strikes. Recently, next slide. Recently, we have started a contact facility. It's a tele-consultation facility where all our doctors across the country who are treating COVID patients, they are online in telephonic teleconsultation with a dedicated team of pulmonologists at AIIMS in New Delhi, and with other specialists also. So it's all doctors in the country treating COVID patients are in touch with each other, so that we are able to discuss the treatment protocols, give the best treatment to our patients. Similarly, in this crisis itself, we finalized our telemedicine guidelines, we approved them, and now patients can seek advice from doctors even from remote locations, because there was earlier, since they were not notified and also there were legal issues and all. Now the pharmacies can deliver medicines at home after digital prescriptions. These are some of the ongoing actions. Next. This is in fact, apart from being the Union Health Minister, I also look after the Science and Technology Ministry. So this is the slide which tells you that simultaneously we have started action through our Science and Technology Ministry. In the Department of Science and Technology, out of over 500 startups, academia, R&D labs and industry in the area of diagnostics, drugs, ventilators, protection gear, disinfecting systems, etc., identified more than 20 entities have submitted feasible proposals providing technological intervention. So simultaneously we are using this unfortunate COVID situation as a blessing in disguise. We are promoting our young entrepreneurs, scientists for giving good proposals, and then the Department of Biotechnology has formed a consortium for development of medical equipment, diagnostics, therapeutics, drugs and vaccines. So this is, and then again the Department of CSIR, that's our most prestigious organization, over 75 years old. This is also doing a lot of scientific activity about development of new technologies, development of new diagnostics, which can give us results in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So a lot of activities happening simultaneously on the science front to discover new drugs, discover new vaccines, discover new technologies, and help to find out COVID-19 solutions. Next. As I said in the very beginning, we have been very fortunate to have a very dynamic leader, our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, who has been monitoring everything right from the very beginning of this whole lot of activities that we had to initiate in January, and he has been leading from the front. You know that he is the one who ultimately decided and he declared the Janta curfew, the lockdown. He took the initiative in organizing a meeting of the SAARC nations, and it's not only the meeting that he suggested about the creation of a South Asian COVID-19 emergency fund. India pledged $10 million for that. He offered Indian rapid response teams of doctors, specialists and testers. Can we go to the next slide? Next slide. This is just a brief description that about the offer that the Prime Minister made to the SAARC nations about online training of SAARC nations, emergency response staff, assessment by regions, trade officials on impact on intra-regional development, sharing integrated health information platform software for diseases surveillance, using training website, set up for sharing information in SAARC languages also, using SAARC Disaster Management Center to identify and popularize best practices. ICMRs help to set up a research platform for sharing ideas for diagnosis and therapeutic interventions for disease. So this is in brief. In fact, there are large number of interventions we have done to organize the society, to keep everyone in the country in the loop, and as it seems we are in control of the situation, but we are not complacent at all. We are taking all proactive measures to ensure that we do our best, and in the end I am praying that not only Indians but people all across the globe and in our region also, they should all be free of this COVID-19 menace as early as possible. Today is a very, very pious day in India. It's Ram Navami, and for India and I think for the whole humanity, Lord Rama is a great human being who has inspired the whole humanity, and with his blessings we are hopeful that very soon we shall have a world which will be free of this menace. With these good wishes for all the fellow ministers and their countrymen, and of course thanking once again WHO, the regional office, and also the headquarters, which had made us, given us this privilege of listening to others, what is being done in other places, and then to learn from their experience and use the best practices of other countries also for the benefit of our own countrymen. Thank you everybody. Namaskar.
For this very exhaustive account, and we congratulate you and the Indian government for the measures put in, because for a country with 1.38 billion people, in the largest country in my region, to have the cases at 1834 is indeed commendable. Your other steps that you had mentioned, that you could put thermal screening very early for 7 main airports, which was then extended to 30 airports, also augmenting lab capacity from 15 to 124 labs, then including the private sector labs, which were 52 in number. We also congratulate you for your personal efforts, visiting the states yourself, trying to visit all the hospitals which were concerned to see how prepared they were. And we do hope and keep our fingers crossed that this menace or this disease does not really go much further. And even though, as you have mentioned, there is a lot of effort on preparedness, and the hospital beds have been augmented, ventilators have been ordered, testing kits have been ordered. We do hope that the virus is contained in India, and I join you in what you said at the end, that you are looking forward to a COVID-free world. Thank you once again. And with that, I move on to the Minister of Health of Timor-Leste, who also has another appointment. Can I invite her to make her presentation?